Steering wheel, somebody tell him to give it to me.
There's something loose between my legs.
I don't know. Let go!
I'm heavier than a freaking boat.
Nothing you can say can make that any better.
Yeah, nobody. No more radio for the rest of the race.
I'm going home.
Hello and welcome to another episode of DRS FC. We are at the end of our team previews and I guess we can say we saved the best for last because technically that's not wrong. These are the top three teams in the Drivers Constructors Championship. Wow. In the Constructors Championship. And we're going to talk about them. I'm Andre Carlisle, one soccer nerd, here with three other soccer nerds who are going to introduce you to these teams, drop their hot takes and all of that. Deep D is with us to talk about Red Bull. First of all, Deep D, how are you?
I'm good, Andre. You got me talking about Red Bull today, so I'm going to try to be nice about that.
Or you don't have to. There's a reason why, we can say what we want on this podcast, at least for now. We'll see what happens if we happen to get in. If Red Bull wants to sponsor this, we might be very nice to Red Bull at some point. But until then, whatever. I'm also here with Donald, who's going to talk us through Ferrari. Donald, how are you?
I can't drink Red Bull, so even if we had Red Bull, I can't, this is not something I do. But I'm glad that we have this group on here. You said you saved the best for last, and that gives me a lot of pressure because you haven't heard my voice on the other one. So thank you for that. Thank you for that added pressure to talking about Ferrari.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure for all of you because I think we've done every single preview and we haven't had any of you three on. So we really saved the best for last in every single way. Don't tell the others I said that. And we also have McLaren here. McLaren is here. Meg is going to talk about McLaren is what I actually meant. Meg, how are you?
We have a tongue twister today.
It's killing me.
I'm good. My orange team won yesterday, War Damn Eagle, and that means I get to talk and be a hater about another orange team today.
I thought that was going to go a different way. I thought you were going to say, and I'm ready to support another orange team.
No, we know at my core how I feel.
All right. Again, unless McLaren wants to reach out and sponsor the podcast, perhaps we can change our team.
Okay.
I'm from Florida. I love fruit, right? I'm happy to talk about papaya positively.
Nice.
Look, I can't drink Red Bull, but I can absolutely drive Ferrari or McLaren. So if either of them want to reach out, I'm happy to take that call.
Fair enough. And yeah, I feel you on the Red Bull. I don't feel like my heart's going to explode. It's not something I'm here for. All right. If you haven't followed us for our team previews, please check out the other two. We've gone from the bottom of the grid and talked on every single team. We've introduced them throughout, talked about where they finished in 2024, what we think they're going to do in 2025, any big changes that happen either to the car, as far as we know, because obviously they haven't all been unveiled yet, but any big changes we anticipate on the car, anything in the garage or the engineering side, and then we dropped a hot take as well. So we've got plenty of hot takes for each team. I may or may not have said Haas podium at some point during these. If that makes you feel like not listening, I apologize. Please continue to listen. I promise these people are a lot smarter than I am. So we're going to get started here with Red Bull right after a break, and we'll have Deep D talk about Red Bull. Okay, Deep D, get us started. Red Bull going into 2025. Weird year for them in 2024, but let's go. What do you got?
Yes, and I think, you know what? It's going to be a weird year for them in 2025 as well. The 2025 driver lineup is obviously Max Verstappen and the new kid, who's not really the new kid, Liam Lawson. He got the bump up over Yuki, as we have talked about pretty extensively in the past. But yeah, he's technically going to be a rookie because it's his first full season with Red Bull. And we'll see how that goes. But yeah, last year they finished Constructors in third after having a really big lead in first and kind of squandering that. They finished with 589 points, most of them due to Max, who finished drivers in first, and he had 437 points. So 437 out of the 589. Checo was the second driver. He finished the drivers' championship in 8th place after a very strong start, actually, but dropped off pretty significantly and finished with 152 points in the year. I think, the biggest changes to them are going to be who's on the actual team outside of the drivers, because several changes have been made in the garage and to management within Red Bull. So we have already mentioned this before on the podcast, but the biggest, for me at least, the biggest name going out of Red Bull is Adrian Newey. He is out and he is going to Aston Martin. He has been with Red Bull since 2006 and obviously has been such a big part of their success. We know him as one of, if not the best engineer and designer of cars in the F1 world. And from his 19 years there, he contributed to 6 Constructors Championships and 7 Drivers Championships. I'll talk a bit more later about why he's such a big loss. Also, they've lost sporting director Jonathan Wheatley. He's gone and he will be joining Audi as their team principal when they take over Sauber in 2026. He was also with Red Bull since 2006, so 2 pretty big stagnant names, stalwarts in the Red Bull garage, are going to be gone. With Wheatley going out, they've had some reshuffling of positions, and one of those guys who's been promoted is Max's race engineer, Jean-Pierre Lambias, or GP. He will remain Max's engineer, but he will also be promoted to the head of racing for Red Bull as a whole. So kind of juggling both of those will be interesting to see, but I feel like his priority will remain obviously with Max. Will Courtney is the head of strategy. He will finish his contract with Red Bull, which goes through mid-2026, but then he'll be joining McLaren as their sporting director after that. McLaren also poached Rob Marshall, I think was his name, last year, beginning of 2024. So they're taking another name from Red Bull come next year. And then finally, we know Checo, he's been encouraged to go be a family man and is being replaced by the menace that is Liam Lawson. So those are the big changes in the garage. And with that comes some changes to the car as well. As we know, the Red Bull car started off really strongly, but then after a few races, I think after 6 races or so, they started having significant problems with the balance of the car and how it went over curbs and just the sensitivity of the driving. And Max himself, like, he had issues with it. And if Max has issues with a car, you know it's got to be something wrong with it because he can deal with a lot. And so after like some tests and trying to figure out what it was, this is from Racing 365, that journalist article, and they've said that the RB20 had problems with both the dynamics and the aerodynamics. Basically, they didn't match and they didn't jive, and you need both of them to work to have a stable car. And so the dynamics include like the suspension, which is under the floor of the car, and those were not able to provide stability for when the car especially went over curbs. So there was a lot of bouncing. There was a lot of just the wheels were not touching the ground when it was supposed to, which made it obviously more difficult to drive. And so what they are going to try to do, from what I've understood, is just very much simplify their design and focus on the inner parts of the aerodynamics, and make sure that they manage the cooling and the airflow through the car, because they had some problems with overheating. And I know last year before the Hungary Grand Prix, they changed some of their, they had an upgrade between Silverstone and Hungary and changed their engine cover. They changed a couple other things, which was supposed to help with the cooling, because Hungary is also a very warm track, but that caused some other problems, so they hadn't quite figured that out. So that's their main goal, I think, for this coming year. Helmut Marko has said, and I think Christian Horner has also said, that they want the car to have a wider operating window, which means that the specs on the car can fit several tracks and they don't have to keep readjusting for each track. However, there's been some pushback on that from the new lead engineer who took over Adrian Newey's spot, Pierre Wash. I don't know how to say his last name actually, but he's French, but he's not keen on that. He wants to keep a narrow operating window, and kind of adjust as the season goes. So that'll be interesting to see what they finally end up with. And then the next two are not necessarily changes to the car, but changes that will be coming. In 2026, Honda will be leaving Red Bull and going to Aston Martin following Adrian Newey. This will be Honda's last season providing an engine for Red Bull. So we'll talk about 26 in a different episode because with the new regulations and everything, there's going to be a lot of changes. And then finally, the wind tunnel that they use, Christian Horner has named it a Cold War relic because it was originally built in 1947, but has been like updated since then. However, because the building is so old, there's poor insulation. And so it actually makes it very susceptible to outside air temperature fluctuations and doesn't give them an accurate reading on a lot of the data that they get from that. So they're building a new wind tunnel that's supposed to be finished in 2026. So again, it's not going to help them this year, but most likely next year. Moving on, my predictions for where the drivers will finish this season. I think Max will not win the Drivers' Championship. I think he will get second. I think he'll still perform well. And I think Liam's going to finish ninth. I think he will score a good number of points, but he'll be score under 100 points, putting him in ninth place. And the team, I think, will finish Constructors in fourth, which may or may not be a partial hot take. But I think with some of the all the changes that's going on, I don't think they're going to do that well or as well as they're hoping. Their biggest challenge for 2025, I think one is going to be managing the new power structure within the garage and making sure everybody knows their place. And then two, I think they'll have trouble getting Liam Lawson to kind of do what they say. Like we know the drivers under Max have to do kind of what Max wants and they're going to have to follow team orders. And we know that Liam Lawson doesn't like to really do that. He's got a mind of his own and loves to like challenge and race. And we saw what he did to Checo when he was driving on the same track as him. So that clash between Liam and Max may be fun to see if there will be one. But I think that's going to be difficult to kind of tame Liam. Their biggest win in 2025, dare I say, getting rid of Checo. This is their biggest, unfortunately. But also, with them placing third in Constructors, they got more wind tunnel hours. So even though their wind tunnel is not the best, they still do get more time to kind of try to figure out what went wrong with their car and fix it. Their toughest track in 2025, I think it's going to be the high downforce tracks, which means the ones that have more turns, more curbs, and less like straights, which we know Max loves a good turn. He's really good at like finding that inside line and doing those, but with the poor suspension and kind of a bumpy track and bumpy curbs, the car might not do so well. And so the tracks with the most turns are Singapore, Abu Dhabi, and Baku in Azerbaijan. So I think those might cause them a few issues. And then my hot take, well, one is not necessarily for this season, but I think this may be Max's last season with Red Bull. If not this season, it'll be 2026. And then I didn't write this down, but my other hot take is that Liam will outscore Max in at least one race this season.
A bonus hot take from Deepti. I'm here for it. Thank you so much. There's a lot to say and talk about with Red Bull. It almost feels like they went from a situation of, especially last year, like maybe too many cooks in the kitchen, people pulling in different directions, to now a lot of people are bailing and jumping ship. So who's left and who do they listen to? And like, how do you rebuild the leadership structure that they had before when everything was working so well? I have no idea what to expect from this team. A rookie in the car, a car that wasn't great last year, got better as the year went on. I heard that the whole like, if you've been paying attention to any F1 news, you'll hear, and we'll talk about it later, flexi wing stuff kind of has gone on. There's been a lot of talk about that. And apparently when the FIA said like, hey, this is going to be legal, they're like, well, we're going to have the flexiest of wings. And then the FIA was like, actually, after these races, we're going to crack down. And so who knows how much money and resources they invested in that. Basically, Red Bull's going to be for a very weird year.
Yeah. I also want, like, about the design and the person who is designing the car. Red Bull kind of said and like almost insisted. They were like, oh yeah, like Adrian Newey wasn't really influential in the design of the RB20 or even the RB19, which was fantastic, won like 22 out of 20 or 21 out of 22 races or something. And so there's two paths. Like people are like, oh, losing him is such a big deal. But then the other people are saying, well, if you say that he wasn't that big of a part in your previous car, like is losing him even that big to you guys? And so part of it seems like a bit of copium, you know, them being like, yeah, he wasn't he wasn't part of it. We're going to be fine without him. But I don't really believe that.
We'll talk about it more in my preview, but I will say if their argument is, well, he wasn't even really involved, then Rob Marshall leaving is even bigger deal because Rob Marshall definitely would have been involved. Mm-hmm. I will say, as soon as you said Liam Lawson, can he be tamed? My brain started playing that bad Miley Cyrus song from back in the day. So now Liam Lawson forever can't be tamed by Miley Cyrus. That's what I'm going to associate you with.
I think for this team, it's hard, right? Because like we've been talking about with the rookies and kind of what I've been opining this entire offseason, these rookies got to prove real quick that they are not rookies. Because if they are rookies, Mercedes fourth might be ambitious because we've seen over the last, 3 months of the season last year, how human Max Verstappen can be without a capable teammate. And Checo disappearing and going to be a family man in the middle of the season essentially costs them the championship. And I'm not saying that's all on him, but Max Verstappen doesn't play well with others. But he needs them and the money team, Visa, PayPal, whatever, to get along with what he needs because they're all basically driving for him. And if right now he's got a rookie on his team, he's got another rookie on the backup team, and he's got Yuki, who does not give a shit about him. So he has to overcome that, and Red Bull is going to have real problems because what are they going to do, right? They can't, their backups aren't going to just waltz in here and do the job, because if they could, they would be on the grid, and these rookies would be the backup drivers. So Christian Horner is putting himself out there and saying, if these guys can't work, then they're not gonna do much this year. So I'm curious to see how quickly that the idea that they're kind of unbreakable, how quickly that comes down. If in the first few weeks of the year we see these rookies not amount to what they thought they were going to be.
I'm just fascinated to see Max's reaction to all of this because Red Bull is probably in the most unstable position it's been in for a while, and the car wasn't great. There were plenty of times last season where he was angry all the time on the radio. He was frustrated. Now he ended up turning it around toward the end, but that's because he had a super fast start, a super good start. I don't think they're going to replicate that start. So when does dealing with Max become like we're dealing with the want to pull your hair out level of Max, or like he's not winning, he's not happy, the car isn't great, he's in these wheel-to-wheel battles he doesn't want to be in, he's getting penalized by stewards, he's having all these issues. To me, that is like, one, I'm salivating for it because I need it, but two, it's just like I'm super eager to see how they respond to all of that because I don't know what they do.
Plus, he's having a kid. Like, we keep forgetting about it. I understand that a lot of people do not know what the school of parenting for Max Verstappen looked like. So maybe he's not as involved as other dads. But, like, I don't have any statistics to back this up. But it has definitely impacted drivers in the past when they have had children during seasons. Mm-hmm. And drivers have talked about how it has impacted. Famously, Seb talked about it. And he's like, I wouldn't have given up having my children. But, like, it definitely was an impact. I missed my family more. I was more tired. I didn't get the recovery. I didn't focus as much. So it sounds silly to say, but like I do think it's going to impact him in a way, whether that's making him grumpier or whether that's making him think, like Deepti said, like maybe he doesn't actually want to stay at Red Bull. Like maybe he wants to go somewhere else and try something different.
I'll add another layer to it. It adds fragility because when you're a parent of any kind, right? Like you see it in other sports too, in non-contact sports as well, but especially in other racing sports, you see some people not necessarily dial it back, but that hesitation, that quick hesitation could be the difference between him going into the corner against the Lando Norris like we've seen him last year do, and him kind of throttling back just enough for someone else to take the lead, and he kind of goes, hey, I'm just not going to make that turn with the same recklessness that I did in the past. Maybe, but it's also Max Verstappen.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I actually don't think that's true in F1 generally. Like, I think there are psychopaths who turn it out in such a way. Because if you look at the old F1 drivers, like, those people all had kids, and they absolutely did not care if they were going to die. I mean, I think it is true for some people. Like, if you, not to go on a far off tangent here, but if you look back at the accident that happened in 2020 or 2021, Grosjean's accident. I can't remember what year it was.
I think it's 21.
He talks about in that moment, like, being terrified that he was never going to see his kids again, and that was like what got him out of the car. But you also hear again some psychopaths who are like, "What was the best day of your life?" And without hesitation, they're like winning the Monaco GP or whatever, and they're like, "You have 4 children. Those aren't the best days of your life." Like, Kimi is kind of the prototypical example. Like, I think Kimi is a great dad, but he certainly did not hold back when he was a driver and he had kids. So it'll be interesting. Maybe it does change. Maybe that's like the sensitivity chip he needs. Who knows?
Well, the difference between those guys and Verstappen is Verstappen has been born, trained, raised to be a cyborg. And when cyborgs get human elements, they are no longer cyborgs.
All right, let's move on from Red Bull, because honestly, we could talk about Red Bull forever just because they're fascinating, and we're all just kind of like, I think, circling around just the uncertainty that's around the team. So I think it is going to be fascinating to see how they start the season and how they endure throughout the season, because there's a lot they need to recover from, I will say. All right, let's take a quick break, and then Donald is going to talk to us about Ferrari. All right, Donald, let's do it. I hate to continue to say these things, but I feel like this podcast is now the #1 Ferrari podcast on the planet, given how much we all love Lewis Hamilton and despise Max Verstappen. But we're going to try and be fair and impartial. And also, there's a lot to talk about with Ferrari. So please, Ferrari.
Yeah, it's probably the most anticipated portion of our previews, because there's so much anticipation around this team and what it can and can't do. Of course, the 2025 drivers, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, they finished second last year. Of course, this is Lewis's first year at Ferrari. Last year, it was Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Together, they finished second. And let's go through a little bit of what they did. In 2024, Charles Leclerc finished third in the Drivers' Championship with 356 points. He had 3 wins, but more importantly, he had 13 podiums, which is kind of what propelled both he and Ferrari towards the top. Lewis Hamilton, on the other hand, finished 7th in the Mercedes car, 223 points, just 20 or so points behind his teammate at the time, George Russell. He had 2 wins of his own and 5 podiums. Now, Ferrari is not just undergoing a lot of changes in the drivers' department. The garage is undergoing changes as well, and it's led by a reunification of sorts. Angela Cullen is going to be reuniting with Lewis Hamilton to serve as his trainer once again. They worked together from 2016 to 2023. They won 4 titles in a row with Mercedes, and Hamilton has always said that she has helped him become the best possible driver that he could be, and also the best possible person he could be. And she has pushed him to be the best version of himself. So there's a lot of excitement around the fact that those two are getting back in the lab, so to speak, together. They also have a new technical director. Loic Serra has been appointed as a technical director. He's going to oversee all the tweaks to the car. And let me tell you, they have retooled their car. Their team principal, Fred Vassar, has basically said that the new car will have a maximum of 1% in common with the 2024 car. That's a lot of changes, and it's really in a lot of the tweaks that they want to do. The first thing that they're doing is they are switching to a pull rod suspension system at the front of the car. What that aims to do, and of course, I would love to get Deepti's take on this afterwards, improve aerodynamics and dynamic performance, and hopefully solve the energy distribution and overheating issues that has plagued Ferrari in the past. It also allows for maintaining a ground clearance and the flexibility and rigidity of being able to do that. Now, why would Lewis Hamilton specifically be thrilled at this sort of change? Well, the main thing that this is built to do is reduce the porpoising and sliding on the front end. The main thing that Mercedes car had an issue with the past 3 years, persistent porpoising and sliding on the front end. So I know he's loving at least this portion of the change because he, it's allowing him to kind of reduce some of the issues that really frustrated him with the Mercedes car these past 3 years. The side panels are being shifted back about 10 centimeters. That's meant to combat air turbulence caused by front wheel disturbances, and it should help with the rear aerodynamics. And the one thing that they're also doing with the gearbox and rear suspension is they have a new kinematics system in place, which should help their performance. They've been driving the car. Obviously, they've been doing testing. In fact, Lewis Hamilton has run out of testing days because they're only allowed 4 this year. But they have a braking system now that's similar to Mercedes that should help with the tire warm-up issues that Ferrari has had in the past in qualifying practice. Again, the fact that Lewis Hamilton is somewhat familiar with this should help them in the long run because he doesn't have to test at least that portion of it because he's familiar with it. Now, let's get to my predictions. Where do these two guys finish? Leclerc, I'm saying he's going to finish 3rd. And this might be a hot take. Lewis Hamilton is winning his 8th. Ooh. Lewis Hamilton is winning his 8th Drivers' Championship. Because of those two, they will also win the Constructors for the first time since 2008. Now, their biggest challenge in that is to kind of put the pressure to the side, and in a weird way, they have to drive individually as a team. I think what Charles and Carlos did at the end of last year is what Ferrari needs to do all year. The fact that they were able to go for theirs, but at a certain point they knew that together nobody could stop them. And when they were on that wavelength together, look how great their car was driving and look how fast they were going compared to other teams. And they almost caught up and won the Constructors. They were within a lap, basically a half lap of that happening at the very end. So I think Charles and Lewis will work together, but obviously both are capable of winning the drivers. And it's a question of if Ferrari will defer to one or the other to make that happen. And I'm sure there's pressure on both sides. You got Leclerc, who's one of the best young drivers out there, and you have Lewis going for a world record 8th title. And both of those storylines are incredible and would be incredible. Which one do they pick? Or is it just kind of what they did last year? Hey, let it fly, see what happens, and then kind of mid-season go, all right, here's where we're at. Lewis, Charles, which one of you is ahead by X amount, we're going to ride that. And now we start doing this thing where we work together to win the Constructors, but also get the individual, the Drivers' Championship as well. Their biggest win in 2025, I mean, if they pull it off, it will be the Constructors. But I think that's the idea that those two working in harmony, and they're good friends. So they're. It seems like, and we kind of talked about at the end of last season, they both had that look in their eye of this is going to be us next year, and so let's get it in our minds to do what we need to do. That will be their biggest win if they're able to pull that off. Their their toughest track in 2025, ironically, for a track where they each have one win since 2018, which is when Leclerc joined the grid, it's Monaco. Because when they are not winning, they are not doing great at Monaco. Leclerc has an 18th place, a retired, did not start in his 7 years at Monaco. Of course, he's became the first Monegasque-born driver to win the race in 93 years, but it's hard for him to get into that top place. And Lewis, while he hasn't done terribly, he's always in that usually like between 6 and 8. That's where he's kind of finishing, except for, of course, in 2019 when he won the thing. And in 2018, he did have a podium. So I think this team is poised to be really great if they can put aside the pressure. The question, I think the hot take I have, other than the fact that they're going to win everything next year and kind of do a clean sweep, is they will finish 1, 2, and at least 3 races. And I think that's going to be what propels them to the Constructors.
I think the hard part I want to preface this by saying lifelong Ferrari fan. I would love either driver to win. I think the hard part is if they default to what they did last year, I think as great as Lewis is, it does take some time to learn that car. And so if Charles does get a really strong head start, having already been integrated into the system for a long time and having the car, even though it's different, that they've been able to consult him on the design changes in a way that they weren't able to do so with Lewis. I think that could be really hard. And I would hope that Lewis wouldn't be discouraged by that if they made that choice. I don't think he would. He's got like ultimate challenger spirit. But I think that could be super hard. The one other thing I just want to note, because I didn't know this until recently, but Fred Vassar actually has worked with Lewis before too, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
And just like we as the DRSFC team have been like mainlining Ferrari social content, like it's been extremely hits perfect. And Lewis looks so happy and he's like engaging in social media content in a way he never did during Mercedes, that he was just like, F you guys, I don't want to do this. And so the vibes are back, which I think is good for Lewis, bringing back Angela, being back with Fred, somebody he's always admired and enjoyed working with. I'm really hopeful for him that can be a good environment.
I also want to point out, and you as having supported Ferrari for so long would know this, last year, part of the reason why they were able to propel themselves to within, a half lap of the constructors was the issues that plagued them with regards to strategy, with regards to pit stops and all of those things went away. They were able to kind of hold it together and be a semblance of a responsible team last year. Will that hold? Is the question. That is obviously going to be a part of it. There's going to be some luck involved, but Ferrari has, the running joke for years was that Ferrari would do everything they could to shoot themselves in the foot. And last year they didn't do that. And we're like, hey, if you have a, semblance of a game plan here and you execute it, look what you can do. They have to continue to build upon that. But, you kind of get to a point where you're not waking up every day, every race thinking, okay, how is Ferrari going to mess this up this time? But you don't want that to relapse. You don't want, the one thing to happen that kind of throws everything into disarray. And you got to start that building block back at one.
Yeah, we have in soccer, we have a term that we use for teams like this called unserious.
Unserious.
So, yes,
they were
Ferrari
unserious for a decade.
Very unserious, especially in the strategy department, and that's not fun. So I'm hoping those are gone. You said a couple things here that are very, very interesting to me. One, Angela being back. I think when they announced that split was happening, there were questions like why, and we never really got any answers. But now that she's back, it feels like maybe it was a Mercedes thing. Like it's so interesting that that's the case. Who knows what could have happened there? But I think Lewis is somebody that thrives off of having his people around, being familiar, kind of like that. He has his dad at a lot of races as well. I think he just needs to feel that, and I think having her back will be a very good thing for him. Where you scare me though. Maybe not you specifically, but Fred Vassar. My guy. There ain't no way in hell this car can have a maximum of 1% in common with the one that raced in 2024. Regulation changes, or the car completely changes in 2026. You better not have put all that damn money into 2025 changing the entire car.
Oh, don't you worry. Don't you worry. McLaren has done a similar thing. We'll talk about it. I read a very sketchy quote and I was like, McLaren, okay.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Like I hear them and they're talking and the car's on track. They're not being timed or anything or going up against each other. I get it. This is lion season. You get this a lot in soccer as well. This is lion season where everybody's gonna win a title. Everybody's like, oh, we're perfect. We got the right coach. We got the right game plan. We know what we're gonna do in every scenario. Okay, No, I'm not believing that the car is that different. It can't be. It cannot be. Otherwise, in 2026 is going to be a wrap for Ferrari.
But I also think what's good about it, whether it's 1% or 100% of their changes, right? I think Megan made a great point in that you have a lot of these changes that are kind of specifically designed to help benefit Lewis Hamilton, but the person who got to kind of be in the room for all of these discussions was Charles Leclerc. So it's not like this car is built for one person over the other. It's more of this car was built for Ferrari Charles was involved in the process, and then they kind of said, okay, now that Lewis is entering the fold, how do we work him in, and how do we make it where it's as comfortable a transition as possible? And I think that's the key here, is that everything on its face so far has been 100% comfortable for everyone. And of course, that excites a lot of people, and it gives you that whole thing of what they can do in the car. But again, the plans don't always execute the way they need to. And that's the question here, is how does Ferrari handle those twists and turns?
Yeah, I want to mention specifically what you said about the front suspension. I was looking into this because that's like Red Bull had an issue with their suspension last year. And so I kind of dove a little bit deeper into that. With Ferrari changing their front from a push rod to a pull rod, they are going to be pretty much matching McLaren's setup, which is pull rod in the front and back, whereas Red Bull has a pull rod in the front and a push rod in the rear. Basically, like you kind of mentioned, a pull rod just distributes the weight better and has a lower center of gravity, so there's less drag, and it allows them to go around corners better and just provide better, like a faster aerodynamic performance, whereas some of them go for push rod because one, it's less compact underneath and it's easier for mechanics to fix stuff that goes under and like reach components. And it's like cleaner air under the car, I believe. And then it's cheaper. A push rod is cheaper. So most teams do use push rods, but it'll be interesting. I think now, besides Red Bull, now Ferrari and McLaren, I think as of last season, Kick Sauber and Red Bull Junior also had pull rods in their front suspension. So there's more teams using it because it seems, I guess, obviously McLaren had a really good car and we're getting better. Red Bull's car has always been pretty good. So there's got to be something to that.
So you said Sauber and V-Carb? Those are not teams you want
Two
to
notoriously good teams.
No, yeah.
Great teams right at the front of the grid.
They had a push rod system, and then they switched to pull rod in the front. Obviously, it didn't we know their cars are not good. I don't think it's not only that makes the car, but I feel like Ferrari is kind of trying to mimic what McLaren had last season. Based on what you said,
I've heard
Donald,
that as well with the suspension. It does feel like, and again, I'm way out of my depth when it comes to talking about like mechanical stuff, aerodynamics, and putting like a car together. I don't know what I'm talking about. So when I read stuff, I'm like, oh, this sounds exciting. Who knows what it'll look like on track? But I kind of feel like that's kind of where a lot of people are, because again, we don't know how all of these things are going to come together. Because as Deepti just mentioned, that's one component of a car that is highly advanced in so many other areas. Like one big factor that is so important in these cars is the underfloor, and we never really get to see that, or what it looks like, what the design is there, what's going on there to help generate the airflow from front to back. It's extremely important, but we don't ever see it. So there's a lot with these cars that we don't know about. But I will say the changes that Ferrari seem to have gone to are going to benefit, at least in the long run. But I'm not sure, especially, man, like Donald, I want to be there with you. I want to be like, yes, Lewis Drivers Championship, Ferrari Constructors. I want to do it, but changing teams, first year with a new team, I just feel like it's asking a lot, and Leclerc's more comfortable. So if anybody's going to be the one they're going to point to and say, okay, you're closer on the drivers, we need to prioritize you, at least in the beginning, I would assume it's going to be Charles.
I am perfectly fine with my prediction being a hot take, because it is, and you kind of have to think when you're excited as I know all of us are about this team. You kind of have to go and do some of these hot takes and prepare to be humbled, right? We're just hoping it doesn't happen, but yeah, there's going to be moments this season where both these drivers are going to exhibit some human moments, and we kind of got to roll with that, and they do as well.
Just one little side tangent. Andre, you just talked about how like the subfloor is really important and we never get to see it. Just like a fun little thing to do. If you ever see a crash where they have to take the car off the track, just look to the right or to the left, whatever area, and look at how many photographers the teams, this is like an interesting thing I found out last year, pay for track photographers to also take lots of pictures anytime there's an accident so that they can try to get information. The number one thing they ask them to do is get that floor. And so I think it was last year when Haas had a big crash. The Ferrari people were like very mad at how long it took Haas to get it off the track because they knew that they had a similar floor structure and that Haas engineers were just kind of chilling and not really helping getting it back off the thing. So anyway, just like a fun little side note to look for the next time there's a crash. Hopefully everybody's okay and safe, is to just kind of be on the lookout for that.
That's a very good point. And it is kind of funny. I have heard that like teams don't want their cars to just be on that crane for a while because it's like revealing so many secrets about how their cars operate.
Everybody's looking up like, what's under there?
Yeah, they're like, oh, what's that? It's like, put the damn car down. All right. That's Ferrari. Basically, they're winning everything. But we still have one more team to go, and it's McLaren, who did win the Constructors last year in kind of a thrilling chase. I don't really understand why F1 and F1 people are so resistant of like really celebrating the Constructors. They focus on the drivers, but that's where all the money is in the Constructors. And it's like kind of important because you got two drivers. To me, it's the ultimate, like, I mean, it says it exactly what it's branded as, Constructors. It means you have the best car on the grid because you had two drivers consistently accrue enough points to put you ahead of everybody else. Anyway, done with my rant. Let's take a break and then get to McLaren. Okay, Meg, here we go. We're going to talk about last year's Constructors Champions hopeful Drivers Championship, even though there's a little bit of stumbling around and a lot of hilarity on team radios. But McLaren,
where I think I'm going to spoiler alert myself here. I think their biggest win is they kept both their drivers, which is a real leg up. As much as we think that Lewis is going to do great things at Ferrari, and as much as Red Bull is trying to gaslight us all into thinking that Liam Lawson is the next Max Verstappen, there is some stability that is really beneficial in times like this, especially when they're working towards 2026. So just as a recap, obviously McLaren did win the Constructors finish. They finished first last year, and it was a huge deal for them. They had been trying to do that for a long time. Ferrari made it really difficult for them. They shot themselves in the foot a couple of times, but they did pull it out. And it was seen as a huge success for McLaren to go from being kind of a mid-market team back to being at the front of the grid. Lando Norris is, in my opinion, their driver number one. Oscar Piastri is going to tell himself he's number one, but I don't think that's true. Lando came in second, and Oscar came in fourth. And so they did really well. They were obviously upset that Lando couldn't pull it out in the end. But I think for them as a team, like you mentioned, Andre, like the team was prioritizing the Constructors in a way that maybe F1 media wasn't necessarily prioritizing. So they definitely saw it as a win. This year, they do have some changes. So we talked a little bit about it, but Rob Marshall, who had been at Red Bull Racing from 2006 to 2024, when he left, he was their head engineer. So he had a huge portion, we would assume, in designing the cars for Red Bull. He left last year. He was not fully involved with McLaren in designing last year's car because of gardening leave, which is my favorite little British saying. Basically, he couldn't work for a little while legally. And so this is the first McLaren that he's actually had his hands on for the full process. So the McLaren folks see that as a huge benefit. I mentioned, but Andrea Sella, who is the team principal, said pretty much every fundamental component of the layout has been subject to some innovation, which is pretty interesting because McLaren far and away had the best car last year. So it's like, friends, how much improvement were you trying to do? But here are some of the big things that we've seen. McLaren actually had their public filming day and had media on site. So they're actually the team I would say we know the most about how their car changed because they drove the actual car publicly. Ferrari has done testing days, but they were doing testing days with older cars. Some of the other teams have done private track days where maybe locals have seen the car, but there wasn't any F1 media available. And so McLaren, the biggest thing for them is that the FIA is going to be requiring some changes about the flexi wing. Last year, McLaren kind of secretly was like, yes, we'll change it. They didn't really have to admit what they did, which is kind of a problem to the other teams because they would like to know where the rules are. But the FIA said that they're going to require teams to change their rear wing by the ninth race. And they're also going to use expanded static detection tests in Australia. So what that means is they're going to be measuring more things about the flexi wing during the Australia race, and they're going to be telling teams by the ninth race, these are the changes you have to make. A lot of these teams are already working on these changes, but we'll talk more in a second about why that might be a bigger deal for McLaren. They've also redesigned the monocoque, which is basically like the structural skin of the car. So if you think about like the fundamental basics of the car, to try and give their aerodynamicists more room to play. So they thought that the biggest thing they could do to change or improve their standings is to get more aerodynamics in, which is kind of interesting because I would have thought that they already had a lot of room to play for them, but I guess not. They also went ahead and changed the side pods on the car, and they've adjusted suspension. Now, when I was reading about this, they did not go in depth about what the suspension changes are. I think we're still trying to figure it out. But the purpose of the suspension changes was to avoid pitching, which was a problem for McLaren last year. Now, it wasn't the same as the porpoising issue, but they did still have some pitching issues. And so hopefully those things, if you're a McLaren fan, hopefully they're fixed. That kind of leads to what happens when you take a really good car and then you redesign it, and what happens, like, do you continue to have a really good car? I think McLaren will still have a good car. I think the biggest question is, when do they pivot to focusing exclusively on 2026, and how many race results does it take for them to say, whatever, Ferrari, Red Bull, have a fun time, we're going to go focus on 2026? Or do they say that? Do they say 2025 is more important to us? Okay, so what does that mean? I'm a hater. I think Lando's going to finish fourth. I'll talk more about why in my hottest take, but I'm a hater. I don't think he does well. And I think that Oscar gives him a fright and comes in fifth. I think Oscar is really good. He's shown improvement every year. He's learned how to qualify better. He's gotten more consistent over time. And I really think that Lando has not shown as much. He's shown improvement. Obviously, he's won a race now. But I don't think that Lando has as much room to improve, whereas Oscar is already on his tail and still has a lot of room to improve. What's the biggest challenge for 2025? Team morale. Man, we're going to get some angry messages, I think. We're going to get some sassy comments in the press. We're going to get some Instagram posts that get deleted really quick. I think their biggest enemy is themselves. Their biggest win is that they're the only team with consistency. I think they really benefit from Red Bull losing so many people, particularly since they took Rob, but also that, it doesn't seem like Max has the consistency he needs, and having Liam Lawson for Red Bull. Same on the Ferrari side. While I think Ferrari is more stable than Red Bull is, there are still some changes that have happened. And for all intents and purposes, McLaren is basically the same team as last year. They didn't really have that many changes happen. Toughest track. I didn't put a specific track because I'm annoying, but I did say that, like, post rear wing change, I think they're going to have some problems. I think they might decide to risk it for the first 8 races, knowing they won't get in trouble, and just try to rack up some wins. And then depending on what the feedback they get on the flexi wing, kind of go from there. They also, last year, if you guys remember, they did not have, the first version of the car had a ton of upgrades after the 4th race. And so it'll be curious to see kind of when they're targeting for upgrades. Is this really like the most evolved version of the car as of right now, or are they already planning to do a bunch of upgrades? In that case, I still think that the North American leg is going to be a problem for them. Historically, they haven't done awesome at those tracks anyway. So I think that's just going to continue to be a problem. All right, so here is my hot take. My hot take is that Lando doesn't immediately do well. I think either there's some surprising results, or like something happens and the car isn't just not what he thinks. And he has a complete confidence collapse because he's got this young kid. And then he also has like Ferrari starting to make a comeback. I think he doesn't do well in some races, and McLaren makes the decision to pivot to 2026, and then he just completely gives up on the championship, because I think he knows once they pivot to 2026, he's kind of lost it. And And so that's probably harsh, right? Like it's probably, and also I don't like wishing for someone to have like a mental breakdown, but like I just think he's very mentally fragile when it comes to being an athlete. And he does not possess the mental toughness that I think past champions have shown, even if they're like friendly, lovely people. Like Nico that we see on commentary seems like a very nice man. When he was in that cockpit, he was angry and aggressive and not a little B-word. And I just don't see that from Lando. Like even when he's mad, it's whiny. It's not like aggression. It's like a why didn't you help me kind of thing. And I just don't think that that's championship mentality. And so I think this year, if he doesn't get his way, especially with McLaren getting so much hype and him specifically getting so much hype, I think that's just going to be kind of his downfall. Again, I'm a hater. I like admit it readily. There's some behind the scenes here. When we were picking teams to cover, I originally said Ferrari, but Donald had said Ferrari like 30 seconds prior to me. So I was like, well, I guess I'm doing McLaren. This will be fun for everyone.
You said Oscar doesn't, like, he may think he's number one. You don't think he is. He's number one in my heart. We all know that. But it's like, what you just said, the team morale and like getting drivers to follow orders. I think McLaren will probably have the biggest issue with that. But I think all the teams that we talked about today may have that issue because, well, first of all, McLaren has two good drivers. Ferrari has two great drivers who may be fighting and like obviously can contend for drivers' championship. And then Red Bull has one driver who can contend and one who wants to contend and maybe not listen to team orders. So I think that is something to look for in all three of these and just see like which teams can overcome that, which drivers can actually work together because obviously everyone wants to gun for drivers championship, but that can get to a point where it can actually harm them in constructors as well. So that'll be just fascinating to see how it plays out.
That's definitely true. I think team orders this season is going to be a fascinating, like, I think that's going to be very fun to watch in races.
I think also you mentioned the confidence or lack thereof or the loss of it. He has to first have it, right? And I think the only confidence he's ever shown in himself was at the end of last season where he was like, I'm going to win the drivers' championship next year. And everybody's like, okay, sure. I don't know what wellness retreats he went at or how many dogs were present there, but he better have found the ASPCA of wellness retreats to get him to that dog level, because otherwise Sarah McLachlan's going to be the one singing, we remember when you predicted you were going to win this thing. I'm not going to sing the song because the song is just going to be butchered very, very quickly because of the fact that he just does not have that mentality or has not at least exhibited it. And so that's where the whole, and as a team, right? Like they could have won. I mean, they won the constructors in spite of themselves for half the year, 90% of the year. They were kind of like, who's our number one driver? It's 1 and 1A. There isn't 1 and 1A. You can't have two captains. You can't have two number one drivers. It's simple. It's in the number one. There's got to be one of you. And until that day that Zach kind of comes in and says, hey, this is our guy. This is our number two guy. If it flips at some point, we'll address it. But until then, this is our number one. This is our number two. Until that happens, I feel like McLaren, they may still try to do it in spite of themselves, but they're going to have, it's going to be very difficult for them. And the inefficiency of trying to satisfy two dudes who one is technically great and one can't scare a chihuahua, like you got to have something break here. And I think in the end is going to be the team.
And I will say, while Lando definitely could be doing stuff offline, like social media does not show us everything. Like he just seemed like he was having fun all summer, which on some ways I'm like, yes, you should get a break. But if you got that close and like people were questioning your mentality and how seriously you're taking this, I don't know that showing that you're like going to a bunch of concerts and partying in Ibiza is like the way to go. Maybe I'm wrong.
He's got to be Rocky training for the fight against Drago. I mean, he's got to be in some cabin in the woods doing log lifts all day and just like with a picture, with just like a newspaper clipping, if they still have those now, of people saying he ain't got no dog in him, right? He can replay this podcast
Yeah, I was gonna say he can have my face
episode
locked in.
Any episode that we've ever had, he could be like, him and Lance Stroll, if they're going to do anything, it's going to be because of this show, right? They could just have that on loop, and he's just doing log lifts and doing the training or just whatever he needs to do to get mentally sharp and prepared, because every other dog is coming after him. So if he has no dog in him, that's going to be a fight that's going to be lost very quickly.
You know who is doing that training? Oscar. I'm sure of it. And he's the quiet dog, right? He's there. He won't show it, but I know he's like itching to prove that he is number one. And I think it'll be those first 2, max 3 races. I don't think they can spend too much time trying to figure out team orders, and figure out who that is, because they don't want the drivers to fight. Like they want, like you were saying, a nice like jiving team. But I think the whole flexi wing thing will also be interesting. Megan, I agree with you. I think that, they'll use those first like 8, 9 races to get as many points as they can, get as many podiums and wins, hopefully. But then after that change, maybe like it'll suit one driver more than the other. And so that'll be something to tackle as well afterwards. So again, there's a lot of just like strategy and puzzle pieces to place. It's not just based on pure talent between the 2 drivers this time.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens with the flexi wing. Like I mentioned, all the teams kind of adopted it towards the end to like see or are like plan to use it at the beginning of this year. The 9 race window does give them some flexibility on how they fix that change. But we'll just have to see kind of what happens. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're excited to be done with team previews. We're going to talk a little bit more about what we think is going to happen before this season. We'll talk about Drive to Survive, and then racing will be here before we know it. So just want to say thanks so much for joining us today, and vroom, vroom.
Vroom, vroom.
Vroom, vroom.